Welcome back to the Shed the Shame podcast, folks. I am your co host, Aljalyn, alongside Alex. We are joined by the co founders of Semaine, a PMS and period support supplement, to talk about endometriosis, a condition that affects over 176 million women worldwide. And before we introduce Catherine and Lauren, I wanted to share that we have reached over 15% of our fundraising goal for the Shed the Shame campaign. So for each purchase of a Shed the Shame water bottle or subscription to Ladybox, Ladybox, donates funds, yes, to the nonprofit WaterAid, an organization that helps, that works to provide clean water and sanitation to over 30 countries around the world. That's that. So, okay, Alex, how about we introduce Kath and Laura?
Yay! Awesome. So excited to be with you all today. We are joined by Catherine and Lauren, who are the co-founders and twins, which I especially love as the mother of twins. I think it's so awesome, who both have experienced endometriosis and have lived with that. And we're really excited to learn more about their period support product. I don't have endometriosis and have been using it, and like OMGZ, amazing. It just makes me feel so good. I love it. So we are really excited to talk about Semaine and their journey and how they have been able to cope with endometriosis. So let's start off with a cycle check-in, and you guys can introduce yourself. So we like to start with a cycle check-in to help normalize all the phases of the cycle, get the lingo out there. So I'll do one, Aljalyn will do one, and then you guys can do one if you feel up to it. So where you're at in your cycle. I am still in this funky postpartum period reorientation, I'm calling it. And so like I was supposed to have my period and it hasn't showed up. So I'm just here, a girl waiting for her period to arrive. So I never thought I would be so anticipatory about my menstrual bleed, but I am. I'm like, where are you? Let's go, come on. So that's where I'm at today. What about you, Aljalyn?
So I have an IUD. I have the Mirena, which is actually getting taken out next month because it is expiring. Yay. And so I really don't know. And I've had some stress come up over the past 2 weeks. And so I'm not really sure where I'm at. I'm more in tune with trying to recenter myself. So that's where I'm at in my cycle. I don't know. And for those of you that don't know, that's okay. That is just okay.
And thank you for bringing that up, because that's so people a lot of times think your period is late, but it's really like predicated upon ovulation, and that can be totally jacked around by stress and by sickness and discomfort. And so if you're a little bit having a free range cycle right now, no worries, that's okay. We've all had them. So thank you so much for sharing that. All right, ladies, introduce yourself and do your own cycle check-in and let us know about Semaine. Come on, let's do it.
Yeah, Alex and Aljalyn, thank you so much for having us. We're so excited to be here. So I'm Lauren, and I'm Catherine. And yes, we are twin sisters, co-founders of Semaine Health. I did my homework because I'm actually not good about tracking my cycle, though I'm getting better because of you, Alex. I got my agenda in my head.
On paper.
And literally on paper. I am a paper. We are geriatric millennials, so paper is still my thing. It's true. It's so true. So I
spit out my coffee.
I love that spit take. That was good.
I am entering my luteal phase, but I should preface that by Kath and I are both on birth control as well, but we use the NuvaRing. And we do like to tell people that because our product is an all natural plant-based product, a lot of people assume like, oh good, you guys are anti-birth control, and we would never be anti anything that women choose for their health
that helps women.
Yeah. So, and for us, we can get into this too. Part of that is our endometriosis care, essentially. So Kath and I both use the NuvaRing, and we both use it the same way in that we sort of skip every 2 periods or so.
Or more, like if there's a vacation coming up, or it just don't feel like
true. So I mean, technically I'm entering my luteal phase, and I, like you, Aljalyn, I feel like there's been some stress this month, and so I feel like it's funny at the beginning of sort of my maybe follicular phase, I was feeling real good. I was like, this is Leo season and it's happening and everything's happening right now. And then we had a little more like stress at work. And then I think I was like, okay, I'm done with this. Now I just need to like retreat inward and be quiet. So I was sort of a little ahead of my actual luteal phase,
Yeah,
I
you
think.
were.
Yeah, I was.
I'm at the tail end of ovulation, although technically not ovulating, so on birth control. But I do find that because I have a regular cycle with birth control, like ovulation, that is my week when I feel better about myself, about the world, like just am in a happier place. And like actually want to work out, which is very rare for me. I don't usually have that and even before I was tracking my cycle, like I knew when I was in my like ovulation week because I would feel like working out. And I'd always be like, oh, this is like, 2 weeks before, 2 weeks away from like my period.
Is it only about like 3 days out of the month?
It's like maybe 2 days.
Oh gosh. And that's okay, folks. That's okay.
That is okay.
I mean, it's rare, but it's so rare. That's when I'm like, oh, I know where I am on my cycle.
Well, I'm always so like inspired by people who are like, oh, I'm on my period, so I step back my workouts, and now I'm just doing like yoga and Pilates. And I'm like, that's my intense workout. But okay, sure, yeah, that's great.
I love that you brought up like your cycle, even with birth control, because I kind of came to the idea of the agenda period when I was on birth control, and I was still feeling those fluctuations once I started paying attention. Even if they're not, necessarily all of your own hormones, they were still like very noticeable patterns once I started paying attention. And I found that birth control is not for me. I don't love what it does to me, but it really needs to be available for anyone who wants it. And that's what I love about having the more information. You can make that informed choice for yourself. Is this something that you feel good about or not? It just needs to be like from that informed place, but it should be available to every woman and menstruator on the planet who needs it.
Yeah,
it is real healthcare. It is real healthcare.
And I feel like it's a tricky thing too, because one reason we started Semaine Health is because we were tired of going to the doctor and just hearing, oh, you have painful periods, that's normal, just go on birth control or stay on birth control and take over-the-counter pain meds. And the fact that there was never further discussion and birth control is just pushed on you right away.
And I think that's why birth control can be vilified, because it has been used as a band-aid when it shouldn't be, right? Birth control is amazing, thank God we have it, right? But it has been used by the medical community just to be like a fix-all for women's quote unquote hormonal issues when that might not even be the case. And I think that's where it's kind of gotten vilified, understandably, because it has been kind of misused.
I also love that you just brought up like your providers were saying that it's normal, because I actually got into a heated Instagram debate with someone of like, you just don't understand, this is normal and it's common. Right. Many women and menstruators experience menstrual pain, but it is not normal, as in like when when all the things are being supported and the flow is going on, it should not be extremely painful and excruciating. And we need to have options, which is why, enter this amazing company. But like she's like, no, you just don't get it. It like, she was like defending the pain, like defensively. She's like, I've been to so many doctors and they all told me this is like what's supposed to happen. I'm like, no, love, it's not supposed to be like this. I'm so sorry. And I just felt like so much empathy, because we're who else are we supposed to trust if the people who are in those positions are telling us this is like what should be happening? I'm like,
and
that's
such a good distinction.
Yeah, it's like, sorry, Ajlan, but it's also our society, right? How we grew up culturally, like it's been ingrained for generations. Like women like deal with pain, so that's normal.
And I do like the distinction of like normal versus common. Like, yes, the pain is common, it should not be normal. And so like, piggybacking off of that, there's the book Vagina Problems by Laura Parker. I have not finished it yet, but I have followed her on social media and learning about her endometriosis story, and then even her having to advocate for herself and her care, her healthcare, and all the doctors that she's had to like go through, and like the surgery that she's gone through, and just like what she shared of like the bruising on her body and everything. So can you share with our listeners what endometriosis can feel like?
Yeah, absolutely. And we love Lara Parker. We've been reading her book as well. It's interesting because they think 10% of women are menstruators probably have endometriosis, but they think that's sort of undercounted because most people are misdiagnosed, underdiagnosed. It takes the average of 7 to 10 years to get diagnosed with endometriosis for women of color. That's almost twice as long. Kath and I, it took us 15 years. And one thing that makes it hard is you can't officially diagnose endometriosis without surgery. It can only be officially diagnosed with surgery. And
Wow.
the other thing is our symptoms can be so varied and different, and it doesn't necessarily correlate with the stage of endometriosis you have. So endo is often staged like cancer, 1 through 4, or now 1 through 5 when they're talking about
Wow.
diaphragmatic endo. So for instance, Kath had stage 2, I had stage 4.
And ours did line up, I think, with our pain levels, because I think your pain was more, mine was, to me, it was like really bad period cramps, but like turned up quite a bit, like horrific cramps. And then also a lot of pain when I would go to the bathroom, especially bowel movements, which is very common.
Yeah.
But Lauren's was like not even cramps, it was beyond that.
And still I had my worst pain sort of the week around my period, whereas like Lara Parker and many other endo warriors, they have their pain all month long. So that can vary as well. And we have a friend who she never had pain on her period. She would get fatigued on her period. But that was it, never even had cramps. And then when she was trying to get pregnant in her 30s, she found out she had stage 4 endo. So it can really vary,
And for some
person to
people, because depending on where it is in your body, like for me, it was more around my digestive organs. And so it didn't really impact my fertility. Whereas I used to think endo was nothing but like impacting your fertility. Lauren, she was looking at it in both her digestive system and reproductive system. So it did impact her fertility. But it's like it used to be the cure, the treatment was a hysterectomy, which obviously if you didn't have it on your ovaries or your uterus, like that, you would still be in pain and then not have reproductive organs. So at least they know a little bit more now, not to just take out women's uteruses and ovaries.
But I think that is why it's been hard to diagnose, because women have, we're told it's normal to have pain. That's what we were told, for decades, for 15, 20 years. And so we're like, oh yeah, okay, keep taking those painkillers and stay on birth control. That's what our doctor said. And I think we would have kept doing that until for me, it got too bad. So I ended up having an emergency situation, and that built up to that is over the 2 years prior to that, my pain had gone from really severe cramping to like a sharp jabbing pain in my pelvis. I tell people it felt like I was sitting on a bouquet of like dull knives all the time. And it hurt to sit, it hurt to stand, it hurt to lay down, everything hurt. Always using a hot pad. So like you see a lot of endo warriors with sort of like burn scars on their abdomens because you can't get it hot enough to sort of help the pain. And what happened to me was I actually had an endometrioma growing on my left ovary. And just like a lot of us, we get cysts, we get fibroids. Those are also common things, but that doesn't mean we normalize them. With endometriosis, you can get something called an endometrioma, which is like a cyst, but it's created by endometrial-like tissue, and you have to get it surgically removed. So a lot of cysts and even fibroids, they'll leave alone if it's something your body will sort of reabsorb, or with a fibroid, it might shrink. With an endometrioma, you have to have surgery. But because no one had ever diagnosed me with endometriosis, and even though actually prior to it rupturing, I had felt a lump on my left side and was talking to my doctor and saying, I need to get this scanned, something's not right. They were still very reticent. I was over in the UK at the time, and love that everybody has nationalized health insurance, but it means it's a lot harder to get specialized care, which a gynecologist is considered a specialist there.
That's a whole nother conversation, that a gynecologist is considered a specialist.
So your GP does a lot, like your pap smears and stuff like that. So yeah, a gynecologist is a specialist. So they were trying to be like, no, you're fine, you're cool, you don't have to go to a specialist. But I did. So the endometrioma ruptured, and I was put in the hospital for 2 weeks, and
oh my goodness,
was going into septic shock, and had a really sort of very grueling 2 weeks in the hospital where they didn't know what was wrong with me, because at first they were like, it's appendicitis. And I was like, no, there was a lump here. They saw it. They think it's an endometrioma, blah, blah, blah. And then at one point, I think I was put into the gynecologist ward, and they were like, oh, it's probably an STD. That's why you're in so much pain. And I was like, what? And so like all this stuff that happened, the 2 weeks was pretty horrific. But what did come out of that after the emergency surgery was, oh yes, you do in fact have endometriosis. And so at that point, obviously the birth control and the pain meds weren't cutting it. And so I did a bunch of research on what endometriosis was, what were the quote unquote cures, which there aren't any. There's just treatments, and tried to find out as much as I could, because I was like, I know the doctors just basically went in and cut out part of my ovary. They didn't fix anything. I had pain all through my pelvic cavity, especially by my colon. So like I knew, there's still issues. And I was really worried about getting another endometrioma because recurrent rates are really high. So I was like, okay, I gotta do something. So luckily, even though I was in the UK at the time, I found a specialist in Atlanta, which is where we live, where we live now, where Kath is living then. And that was the only place I really found a lot of information about endometriosis. This is back in 2013. And there weren't all the blogs and Instagrammers that there are now, which is amazing. There's some amazing Facebook groups. There's like amazing community groups that like organizations like Endo Black. But at the time, I just felt really isolated and alone, even though my twin sister also had it, but we knew nothing about it, essentially.
Or what to do about it.
Or what to do about it. So
can you give us a working definition of endometriosis? Because I think it's definitely in the dialogue more now than it was, but what is it? And what is it, like, what the frack causes it, if they even know? And like, I'd love to just like
Alex,
do a little bit there for listeners.
Yes, I'm so glad you asked that, because we are so in the world that we forget, like, oh, everybody knows what endo is. And that's what we mean endometriosis when we say endo. So technically what it is endometrial-like tissue grows outside of your uterus. So usually when you're shedding, you're lining, that's endometrial tissue that's shedding from your uterus. Similar tissue is growing outside of that. So whether that is on your uterus, on your ovaries, by your colon, your intestines, some women have it in their lungs, which makes breathing really hard. You can even have it in your brain. It can be anywhere. The most common is that it's usually in your pelvis. So Kath and I both have it in our pelvis. Luckily, I don't think we have it anywhere else. So that is the most basic definition. It's endometrial-like tissue basically growing where it shouldn't be. And often that tissue acts like endometrial tissue, is shedding and doing things within your pelvic cavity, inflaming things, but it doesn't have any place to release or go.
And it isn't the exact same thing as the endometrial tissue that you find in your uterus. And you will find, I think Google, a couple places still have the incorrect definition that they say it is your endometrial tissue. And so that's really frustrating. So the information isn't even correct on major websites.
So it's like cells that are similar that can like implant somewhere else and then act as if they're in the uterus, and they're like not in the uterus. So they like could have back pain or like
exactly
brain pain or
like, people get bloody noses because it's up in their sinuses.
Oh my gosh. I've never even
that is more rare. I would say most commonly it's usually found in the pelvic cavity. They have no idea why. There's a lot of different theories about it, and research is being done now, and more research is being done than ever before, which is great, but there was like hardly anything.
That's like it's all relative, right?
Like the mistaken idea, I think, from like the 50s or the 60s was it was like retrograde menstrual flow, like that had I don't know, it was
gotten into other parts of your body.
Now, I mean, there's theories now that it's always known there's a strong genetic link. So our mom probably did have it. They found endometrial scarring when she had a C-section to have us. So there is I think 10% chance that you're 10 times more likely to have endometriosis if somebody else in your family has it.
But like identical twins don't necessarily both have it. We were just lucky enough where we both have it.
I don't know
if
y'all ever watch Sister. But Tia and Tamara Mowry, they so Tia.
Yes.
Tia. I always think it's Tamara. Tia has it. And she's like done interviews about it, but Tamara doesn't have it at all. So we were like, well, how did they do that? We both want to be Tamara.
So I'm so curious, like, how do you two live and like thrive with endometriosis, and like what are some, like, is it based off of your diet? Like, I know that you created Semaine as part of that solution, but like what are some other ways about how people can live and thrive with this?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of people do, because endo can only be technically diagnosed through surgery. A lot of people try lots of other things before jumping to that, because that is a big decision.
Which is totally understandable.
You
tried it.
I tried it. So my first thing was I got off of birth control, and I was like, maybe birth control is making it worse. Who knows? I had no information, and I'd been on the NuvaRing for, I don't know, 5 or 7 years at that point. So I was like, I'll come off of it. Maybe the pain will get better. I'm going to go on this really strict endo diet, which is basically a low inflammatory diet. So vegan, gluten-free, soy-free, because there was still some questions about estrogen and, it's estrogenic like product, side effects that soy can have. It's basically sugar-free. So this diet is very, very, very
And there's
strict.
no, like, if you Google it, there really isn't one like standard endo diet, but generally speaking, it is vegan. You're basically eating vegetables,
some beans if you can, but yeah, it's, and like any elimination diet, it's like your body's going to be different from other people. So you kind of have to figure it out. But I was like, okay, I'm going to go vegan and gluten-free and all the things. And so I did that for about 6 months. Unfortunately, my pain got a lot worse because I think at that point, my birth control had been sort of masking some of the symptoms, which it can do with endo. So when I came off of it and then my hormones were like, woo, sort of coming and roaring back, that no amount of kale juice was going to help me with that. Though I will say the diet was amazing for my IBS symptoms, which Kath and I have always had really weird intestinal issues, and
which is very common for people with endometriosis.
Yeah, that's a comorbidity with endometriosis is IBS, or some sort of like inflamed bowel situation. We had those. We were lucky. So the diet really, really helped that. So I could tell like lowering my inflammation was helping in a way, but I think at that point the endometrioma was growing and there was not like the diet wasn't going to touch that. That had to be surgery.
And it's another example how like every body, BODY is so different, because some people, even who have extreme endometriosis, diet really, really helps them to the point where, they don't even have to take that much medication for their pain. So different things work for different people. And it technically worked for you, but not on the pain level. So
yeah, I always wonder if I had started the diet when I was like in my early mid-20s rather than my late 20s when the pain was peaking. I bet it would have slowed things down. It would have helped, but at that point it didn't. But saying that, answering your question, Aljalyn, like apart from diet, there's so much sort of mental anguish that goes on with having a chronic condition like endometriosis, partly from being dismissed and not believed in your pain for so long, but also the extent of the pain that can happen. I have a lot of trauma from my time in the hospital and how excruciating that was and not really finding any relief. So I think a lot of endo too, it's like to keep the stress levels down and just, that mental anguish that you feel, especially for people who are having pain every single day. I mean, anyone living in chronic pain, that's just so hard. So it's like being as kind and generous to yourself as possible, listening to, you guys always stress listening to your body, and absolutely you have to do that with endo.
Joining those support groups I think are huge. I mean, you would have done that if they had existed in 2013. I'm so glad so many of them exist now. I think that's a big help too. And then the gold standard treatment for endometriosis is surgery, and it's specifically excision surgery, not ablation surgery. Those are two different things. Ablation is very much more common, unfortunately. But we were both privileged enough, lucky enough to find a specialist to get that surgery done, which did significantly help both of us as far as our pain went. But obviously it's not available to probably most women, because most specialists, most endometriosis specialists are completely out of network. Or if you don't live in the States, like you have to have a doctor in network for insurance to cover most of it. So even if you are lucky enough to have health insurance, you might not be able to have health insurance cover it. So it's like one more reason why people won't turn to surgery first, right?
It's
to treat
crazy expensive. It's incredibly invasive. And yes, for us, it really, really helped. I think we were so lucky. We were, very privileged to have any sort of insurance to cover it. And then also the doctor's office that we went to was really generous. Like Kat still owed money. You were paying off.
I had a very long payment plan. Very, very long. And I think they forgave it after like 2 years, because it probably cost them more money to process my checks than they were actually getting from me.
But I mean, it's like putting like sort of like a beacon on women's health, looking at it through endometriosis, right? Because all those issues with healthcare and being dismissed in your pain. Women are often dismissed in their pain more than men, and especially as we all seen in the news, especially Black women, maternal mortality rate is so high in the US, and especially for women of color. And I think in endometriosis, you see that too in endo circles, women who are like, oh, I went to my doctor and right away they said, let's figure this out. Let's hear about this. But more commonly you hear like, oh, no, nobody
nobody knew I had endometriosis until 20 years later, or I had kids and they saw the scarring or something like that. That's a very
So
common story.
I have kind of a deep question for that, like for listeners that, you know, maybe they don't know that they have endo, or, you know, maybe they do, or they're just like trying to figure out like why they're in so much pain. What was something that like really helped you to overcome any like feeling of isolation, any kind of feelings of shame? What was the first step that you were able to take to overcome that, to really like self-empower yourself, and like, yeah, self-empower yourself to get the care that you needed?
Yeah, that was hard for both of us. I think
Because we talked about it with each other, which I think helps a lot. I mean, I almost feel like Lauren was more of the guinea pig because you were the one who had surgery first. So I feel like I had, you know, we didn't have the support groups, but I had you to turn to. But we always said, like, you know, you can't do this right off the bat, but advocating for yourself is so important. Even when you're just getting your, you know, annual pap smear, annual checkup. And of course, when you're in pain, or let's say you're only in pain once a month, when you're at the doctor's, usually when you're getting your pap smear, you want to be like in and out as fast as possible. And you're just kind of like, let's not talk about the other stuff. Let me just get out of here. So we always talk about how important it is to be an advocate when you go to the doctors, and take notes beforehand. You know, take notes when you were on your period and experienced the most pain, or maybe you experienced the most pain during ovulation. Either way, take those notes, bring them with you to the doctor, to like force yourself to talk about them, because you won't otherwise. For so many reasons. One, like maybe you're lucky at that point, you're not in pain when you're going to see the doctor. So you're like, oh, was it really that bad? Or you just feel very vulnerable and you feel like you've been dismissed so many times that, like, that's happened to me, where I'm like, it just goes out of my head. I'm like, oh, what was I saying? You know, like I freeze. And so if I don't have notes in front of me, I'll just be like, yeah, it's not a big deal. We won't talk about it, you know, like, so I do feel like writing things down is huge. And if you can, have someone come with you to be your health advocate. You know, I know that's not always easy to do. It's been much harder, of course, during the pandemic. You can't really do that. But if you have someone in your life who can be the voice for you, I think that's great as well.
I think what's also frustrating is that, you know, I realized I had doctors ask more questions as I got closer to 30 because they were interested in my fertility. And at that point, my pain was so excruciating. I was like, I couldn't understand why they were asking about kids, because I was like, no, I can't do anything because the pain's so bad. So I, you know, maybe kids, maybe not kids, but that is not the issue right now. What motivated me was my pain, you know, and I hope most people, most menstruators, most potential endo patients don't have to reach that point where I was just like, I don't care what you're telling me, you're wrong, because I know this is wrong. You know, this doesn't feel right in my body. So I was motivated, and it like helped me overcome any sort of fear or judgment or dismissal that I used to get from my doctor.
And I think if you're listening to this and you're like, you know, I think I might have it, I do think a first step is finding those support groups so you can talk to others and compare notes. And then the second step would be to start really writing down your symptoms and how you're feeling, and start, if you're not already doing it, start tracking your cycle to really see where those patterns are. And so you can talk to your doctor about that. Because I would say, you know, we get frustrated with being dismissed by the medical community, but, you know, a lot of doctors, they're trying their best, but you know, they're seeing so many patients every day. If the patient's not going to be like, hey, I want to sit down and talk to you, they're going to be like, okay, on to the next, you know. And it's not because they're bad people, it's just how the system is set up. So if you can have that journal with you, and I think having those support groups,
having your agenda period app open, showing them what's going on.
Also, I don't want to give my competitors too many clues, but I'm just thinking, like, how can I have a thing like push this to a doctor's note, like push this symptom to this place, and then you just pull up one place.
Yes, that would be awesome. Yeah.
My flow and clue, I hope you're not listening, but
well, and honestly, like Kath and I guess maybe it was when Clue first came out, we both downloaded it and we were going to use it. And I felt at that point, you know, we weren't interested in having kids. It felt very directed to
fertility
women.
Driven.
Yeah, very fertility driven. And Kath and I were lucky in that sense, because so many women with endometriosis who are affected by fertility, which is only like only, but only like 30 to 50%. It's not like a death knell to your fertility if you have endo. But we, we were never sure if we wanted to have kids, and it
Still
was,
not sure. 38 years old,
we're
still not
getting
sure.
to the point where the window is closing.
Still not sure.
And that's okay too, folks. That's okay.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But it was hard because being around doctors, that was all they wanted to talk about. Like I was saying with my pain, and I was like, well, I want to talk about my pain, but I felt like no one was interested in endometriosis specifically. It was like, well, what is that going to do to your fertility? And I remember when I had my surgery with my, when they cut out part of my left ovary, they were like, don't worry, we kept it because, hopefully you'll have kids after this. And I was like, chop out the whole thing. Like, why didn't you ask me? I would have been, I still have my right ovary if I wanted to do it. There's other options.
Yeah, when
like,
you're in that much pain, you're like, oh, I can't handle childbirth,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like you're
like-
like, there's no way I want my body to go through anything else traumatic. So,
yeah.
yeah.
I wish
I
we
think
had an expanded like definition. This is something that's super duper important to me, is that like fertility is important for yourself as a hormonal
Yes.
health report card.
Yes.
Being that the whole system is functioning
Absolutely.
properly, because the hormones communicate with your brain and the adrenal glands, and like the entire endocrine system is like should be a well-oiled machine, which allows you to have the option to have children, to reproduce or not.
Yes.
But
yes.
it's like fertility should mean like, how can we like, we need a new word that means like, it means you have the possibility to choose childbearing if that works for you. Like I need like a new word, because
Rather
it is
than-
super important, but it's not because you should only be a baby oven. As a mother, I still just like, but it's important as like for me as a human, like my health matters.
yeah.
Yep.
Well, I think a lot of the reason Kath and I were, because in some ways we were super in tune with our bodies. We were dancers growing up and like knew what our bodies could do and used them as instruments. Blah, blah, blah. But like as far as it came to our menstrual cycle, it was a nuisance. It was painful.
It was
wasn't
just something that like you try to forget about.
you tried to
right?
forget about. And then when it became like, oh, it's this fertility thing, which equals vessel for a baby, we were like, well, that's not important. So again, we should ignore it,
Yeah.
until it got to the point.
No,
where
it's like I think until 2 years ago, I really thought like you only track your cycle if you wanted to have a baby.
Yeah. Mhm.
I
Totally.
didn't.
And I think
realize.
that's totally the message that most people get. And it's, we're not here for it. And we're not here for it,
Yeah. And I do want to say that, we created the product because of our endometriosis background, but it's not just for people with endometriosis. You can have painful periods and not have endometriosis. So if you're listening to this and you're freaking out that maybe you have endo, it doesn't necessarily mean you will. It is common, but it doesn't necessarily mean you will. It's for any type of discomfort, bloating, cramping,
And I
fatigue,
know,
that kind of thing.
Aldilin, you spoke about this too. It's like your period changes sort of, depending on
Yes.
your life stage or what's going on in your life. But like we've had a lot of friends who had fairly pain-free, easy periods, and then they have kids, and afterwards it changes. Or the opposite happens. They've had horrible periods, they have kids, and then their periods are really easy.
Mhm.
Actually, one of the horrible fixes for endometriosis was you should have a baby because then your pain will go
Doctors
away.
used to like,
We used to, like,
OMFG.
especially, and doctors are still saying that.
doctors will still say that.
They'll
Yeah.
still say like you should hurry up and have kids now in your early 20s
Yeah. Mhm.
to help with your endometriosis, which is a giant
You
lie,
just want like a reason to spread your seed. Like that's just like gross. to me.
right? Yeah. So like,
Right.
why would you do that? Why would you
And
tell
also,
a
like,
young woman
A
to get
young
pregnant
woman who probably will still be in pain and then has to take
and
care
then
of a
has
baby.
children? Yeah.
Like that is just so, I mean, and what happens is like, your hormones do change during pregnancy. You're not having your period,
Yeah.
you're having the same pain. Post-pregnancy, it's the same thing, especially if you're breastfeeding, so like
Yeah.
with our mom who probably did have endometriosis because they saw the scarring, she was like, yeah, my pain went away for like a couple years and then it came back and it was the same. And then I had, 4 and 5-year-olds twins that I had to take care of. So, I think maybe, especially if women are getting pregnant every couple of years and you have endo, that could maybe. I have no idea why that was the thing. Yeah, we were told so
Terrible
many times,
advice.
you
Terrible
should have
advice.
babies.
100%.
It will help your endo. Yeah, it's insane.
Oh no. All right. So this, like, we could talk to y'all for literally the next decade and not cover everything. You're so
Yeah.
informative and so awesome. I want to just end on like, tell us about the product, how you got here, and what it is doing for your customers, because it's pretty amazing. And then how people can find it if they're like, oh my God, I need that. Where do I find it?
Yeah, it's
Because
also
that's pretty exciting.
yeah.
That's a
So
great
yeah,
partnership.
we started Semaine because of this long endometriosis saga that we go through.
Because basically, before surgery, we had just treated it with lots of painkillers, obviously,
Ibuprofen,
lots of ibuprofen. And then when it got really bad for Laura in the UK, you took ibuprofen with codeine,
yeah, the
a lot
codeine
of
is
it.
go over there.
And
Holy
so
crap.
this happens to a lot of women or a lot of people who have to take a lot of painkillers. It totally ruins your stomach lining, or maybe your liver gets overwhelmed. And so Lauren can't take NSAIDs anymore. She can't take ibuprofen. You can take Tylenol.
Yeah, but it was still
But-
like I think, yeah, at that point, it was just anything I took. I had, really bad stomach cramps that lasted longer than the period pain. So it's like, which one do I do? And I'm married to a scientist, so super lucky. He was like, we're going to fix this for you. He's a bioengineer. At least that's what he got his PhD in. But then after that, he worked in a number of labs, focusing more on biology. And the last one was at the University of Washington's Medical School, where he was in a pathology lab looking at aging, sort of the cellular level of aging. And he was like, we've been talking about different ways of lowering inflammation in my lab. And, I've been doing this reading, and endometriosis and dysmenorrhea, which is the clinical term for painful periods, are very closely connected to high levels of inflammation. So if you have painful periods, you're more likely to have more inflammatory markers in your pelvis. And
Which is like, why didn't we learn that? Because we know that inflammation is pain, right? And that women are usually inflamed during the period, which makes sense why we would be in pain. But why did no one ever connect those two dots for us?
Yeah,
why did it take her husband going through your
clinical
experiences,
journals.
clinical journals, but also just your experience, your horrific experience with the hospitals and stuff? I mean, that's what motivated Matt too, because he saw what happened when you kind of get dismissed, or they just don't have enough information.
And most of us,
Because you're just supposed to have babies. That's
yeah,
why.
exactly.
Ding, ding, ding.
Why are you still talking? Go have another child. And
Exactly.
keep
Kill
going.
yourself with
Right.
pregnancy.
But I mean, it is just wild, like how little we're taught about our cycles. In health class, it's
Yeah,
like
health class, it's
a
all like
blip of like
how to use a pad.
you're gonna start bleeding.
This
here's
is
a
where the
pad,
baby is.
Don't have a baby now.
Don't have a baby now.
Yeah.
Like that was it. And like I was like, is that because we're geriatric millennials? But when we talk to Gen Zers, they say it's still the same thing.
And I think the statistic, I forget the exact number, but it's only like I think 24% of 24 states in the United States actually teach any level of sort of health class, and only like 13% of those or something like that are actually like science backed. So it's like it doesn't even have to be technically, I
Holy
guess
cow.
health class could be abstinence.
I was in public school, during the Bush
were-
administration, abstinence only, and they essentially said like they had us make a map called Powerful Choices, and they're like, if you have sex before you're married, you are probably going to get divorced and maybe end up in prison. And I was like, this is kind of a leap in terms of like
Wow.
what one sexual encounter may do to you.
Wow.
And it like took us down this very, like they had a map, like it looked candy lane pieces, like, and like you do this step and it goes this to the fork in the road, and sex is the thing that's either going to like lead you to being like the president or in prison. And I'm just like,
So I want to touch
this
on
is a lot.
on how systemic shame is.
Absolutely.
It is taught from like when we are in school, you are shamed instead of empowered, you are shamed into learning. And I want everybody that is listening to know like how important it is to find like that love and light in yourself, to learn that self-love, to learn that self-acceptance, so that you can self-empower yourself to learn the information that you need to make the decisions and make the choices that you need that will make your life better, and you can have like focus on your well-being and don't give in to the systemic shame that is out there. Please, like that's so important.
That's exactly, and so much of what we want to do as a company is to help empower women, menstruators, people of periods, people who just have pelvic pain, because we have a lot of friends who no longer have periods. We really want to make sure like the education component is there, because that helps you feel like you get to know your body, right? You can make the choices for your body because you understand a little bit better how it works. One of the things that just blows my brain that we didn't know this before was that your immune system and your menstrual cycle are so closely connected and intertwined.
Yes.
And it's like,
I would talk about this with mom all the time. I'd be like, why do I always get sick like right around the same time? And she's like, yeah, it has to do with your menstrual cycle. And I was like, how? And she was like, I don't know, just does.
Yeah, but it really is, because like you generally have less inflammation or less immune response during your ovulation period, because your body's sort of suppressing that, so it doesn't attack potential foreign DNA if you do get pregnant. If pregnancy is not a thing that happens and you roll on towards your period, then your immune system sort of comes roaring back, and that can come on a little strong and have a very strong inflammatory response. And all of this is completely natural. You want inflammation in your body. It's not that we're trying to get rid of all inflammation, but those of us with period pain tend to have a stronger inflammatory response. And so lowering that inflammation, and because our modern lifestyles contribute to chronic stress and chronic inflammation, that's what we're trying to lower and get rid of, whether it's from standard diet or American standard diet, whether it's from the constant stress we're under because of the patriarchy, or, like our environmental factors. And again, that stuff stresses minoritized communities even more. All of these things that contribute to us to having higher levels of inflammation than our ancestors probably did.
Yeah. So for us, it's really important. We don't use a lot of euphemisms when we're talking our product and we're talking about women's health, because I mean, they're funny. Don't get me wrong. I love a good euphemism, but it's been so taboo and stigmatized for so long. We want to be part of the push to end that. And I think we're just at the very beginning, and I keep saying, I do think Gen Z is like leaps and bounds ahead of,
but
millennials.
What's funny? I was thinking that I feel like I saw an ad recently for a pad that was like the quietest rapper ever.
That's been a big thing. And I'm like,
but that's because when they do studies, women still ask, like, I want something that's quieter in the bathroom. Like that's still,
and it's so funny because I feel like
motivator.
growing up in public school, I feel like we were very shamed and stuff and with periods, but I never once was self-conscious about the rapper sound.
Well,
and if you are, that's not to shame you. I'm just
I definitely was.
Were you?
I was too.
I wasn't, because I remember growing up as a little girl, I would hear it in the bathroom, and I just thought women were always eating candy in the bathroom. And like I just thought that was adorable. Like, oh, that's normal. Everyone's got a little like hard piece of candy, and they're on the toilet.
They're Werther's original.
That's what I got. So now when I go to the bathroom, I'm like, little girl probably thinks I'm like having a piece of candy.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So here is to shedding the shame and continuing to push the stuff forward. So where can people find you all and follow you? Where can they find your product, which is pretty badass?
Yes. So you can find us. We are most active on our Instagram at Semaine Health, and Semaine is SEMAINE. And we have SemaineHealth.com is where you can purchase the PMS and period support supplement.
And it comes in a 36 count bottle on our website. And then we also have the smaller formulation. Yeah, Algerlin's showing it. That box that Algerlin's holding up now, it's the 12 count, which is available at select Target stores nationwide. So we're in over 600 doors nationwide.
That is so freaking awesome.
It's been what a wild ride, but it's been awesome.
Yeah,
it's been really awesome. And we didn't think we were going to go into retail this fast. We started the company in March of 2020. So this has happened really fast. And we were kind of scared about going into mass retail, but we thought we've always wanted to be
more accessible.
This non-exclusive wellness company. There's lots of exclusive wellness companies out there.
There's lots of very expensive supplements. And we want to keep like the high quality of the supplement, but lower the price as much as we possibly can without, adjusting the quality. Because nobody should have to suffer with painful periods, regardless of what your socioeconomic status is.
Right. So you can find us on our website, on Target.com. We're also starting this, actually might have happened already. We're on Thrive Market. That was new. So if you have a membership to Thrive Market, we'll be there. And follow us on Instagram. It's also Semaine Health. Also, Semaine means week, W-E-E-K, not W-E-A-K, in French. For those of you who speak French, you're like, duh. But I didn't know that. But we also don't pronounce it correctly. We pronounce it in a bastardized American way, Semaine.
And we do that because the PMS and period support is just for the week of your period. Unless you'd like to take it all month long as an anti-inflammatory, you totally can. But you just have to take it the week of your period. But saying that, we will be coming out with a new product in the next 2 months. So stay tuned. Stay tuned.
I want to know. It's so exciting.
Yeah. I know. So make sure you all visit SemaineHealth.com to sign up for their e-newsletter so you can stay up to date on that. So thank you, Laura and Kath, for
Thank you for
joining
having
us on this podcast. Thank you to our listeners and supporters of the Shed the Same podcast and fundraising campaign. If you have a story to share about like how you have shed the shame, please email us at podcast@shedtheshame.co. And to learn more about the fundraising campaign, visit www.shedtheshame.co. And I love j'adore Semaine so much. And I love it. I actually, I don't know if it's okay to say this, but I take it even not on my period. It just gives
totally.
me that bit of energy boost for me.
We do that too.
And so I love it. I hope that you will all have a chance to check it out. And so that's my little plug for Semaine. And so until next time, let's keep it real and messy, just like periods, folks. Take care.
Love it.